Part 1 of Chapter 5 of How to Analyze People on Sight. This is the LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Stephanie Lee. How to Analyze People on Sight Through the Science of Human Analysis. The Five Human Types by Elsie Lincoln Benedict and Ralph Payne Benedict. Part 1 of Chapter 5. The cerebral type. The thinker. All those in whom the nervous system is more highly developed than any other are cerebrals. This system consists of the brain and nerves. The name comes from the cerebrum, or thinking part of the brain. Meditation, imagining, dreaming, visualizing, and all voluntary mental processes take place in the cerebrum, or brain, as we shall hereinafter call it. The brain is the headquarters of the nervous system, its home office, just as the stomach is the home office of the alimentive system, and the heart and lungs the home office of the thoracic. Your freight system. The thoracic system may be compared to a great freight system, with each of its tributaries, from the main trunk arteries down to the tiniest blood vessels, starting from the heart and carrying its cargo of blood to every part of the body by means of the power furnished by the lungs. Your telegraph system. But the nervous system is more like an intricate telegraph system. Its network of nerves runs from every outlying part of the body into the great headquarters of the brain, carrying sense messages notifying us of everything heard, seen, touched, tasted, or smelled. As soon as the brain receives a message from any of the five senses, it decides what to do about it, and if action is decided on, sends its orders back over the nerve wires to the muscles, telling them what action to perform. Your working agents. This latter fact, that the muscles are the working agents of the body, also explains why the muscular type is naturally more active than any of the others. Source of your raw materials. The body may be compared to a perfectly organized transportation system and factory combined. The alimentive system furnishes the raw materials for all the systems to work on. Stationary equipment. The bones of the body are like the telegraph poles, the bridges and structures for the protection and permanence of the work carried on by the other systems of the body. Now poles, bridges, and structures are less movable, less alterable than any of the other parts of a transportation system, and likewise the bony element in man makes him less alterable in every other way than he would otherwise be. A predominance of it in any individual indicates a preponderance of this immovable tendency in his nature. Mind and matter are so inseparably bound up together in man's organism that it is impossible to say just where mind ends and matter begins, but this we know, that even the mind of the bony person partakes of the same unbending qualities that are found in the bones of his body. Every cell thinks. Thomas A. Edison, as level-headed and unmystical a scientist as lives, says, "Every cell in us thinks." Human analysis proves to us that something very near this in the case, for it shows how the habitual mental processes of every individual are always off the same piece of goods as his body. Thus the fat man's mind acts as his body acts, evenly, unhurriedly, easefully, and comfortably. The florid man's mind has the same quickness and resourcefulness that distinguish all his bodily processes. The muscular man's mind acts in the same strenuous way that his body acts, while the bony man's brain always has an immovable quality closely akin to the boniness of his body. He is not necessarily a bonehead, but this phrase, like fathead, is no accident. The large head on the small body. As pointed out before, the larger any organ or system, the more will it tend to express itself. So the large-headed, small-bodied man runs more to mental than to physical activities, and is invariably more mature in his thinking. See Chart 9. Conversely, the alimentive type gets its traits from that elemental stage in human development when we did little but get and assimilate food, and when thinking was of the simplest form. In those days, man was more physical than mental. He had a large stomach, but a small head. So today we see in the pure alimentive type people who resemble their alimentive ancestors. They have the same proportionately large stomach and proportionately small head, with the stomach system dominating their thoughts, actions, and lives. The cerebral is the exact opposite of this. He has a top-heavy head, proportionately large for his body, and a proportionately undeveloped stomach system. His small assimilative system. The extreme cerebral differs from other types chiefly in the fact that while his head is unusually large compared to the body, his alimentive, thoracic, muscular, and bony systems are smaller and less developed than the average. The latter fact is due to the same law which causes the alimentive to have a large body and a small head. Nature is a wonderful efficiency engineer. She provides only as much space as is required for the functioning of any particular organ, giving extra space only to those departments that need it. The cerebral alimentive is the combination which makes most of the magnates and the self-made millionaires. Such a man has all the alimentive's desires for the luxurious comforts and good things of life, combined with sufficient brains to enable him to make the money necessary to get them. Nature doesn't give the pure alimentive a large skull, because he doesn't need it for the housing of his proportionately small brain, but concentrates on giving him a big stomach fitted with all modern conveniences. On the other hand, the head of the cerebral is large because his brain is large. The skull, which is pliable and unfinished at birth, grows to conform to the size and shape of the brain as the glove takes on the shape of the hand inside it. Stomach versus brain. Because the alimentive and cerebral systems are farthest removed from each other, evolutionally, a large brain and a large stomach are a very unusual combination. Such an individual would be a combination of the alimentive and cerebral types, and would have the alimentive's fat body with the large highbrow head of the cerebral. The possession of these two highly developed but opposite kinds of systems places their owner constantly in the predicament of deciding between the big meal he wants and the small one he knows he should have for good brain work. We are so constructed that brain and stomach, each of which demands an extra supply of blood when performing its work, cannot function with maximum efficiency simultaneously. Why light lunches? When your stomach is busy digesting a big meal, your brain takes a vacation. This little fact is responsible for millions of light luncheons daily. The strenuous manual worker can empty a full dinner pail and profit by it, but the brain worker long ago discovered that a heavy midday meal gave him a heavy brain for hours afterwards. Clear thinking and a clear stomach. Clear thinking demands a clear stomach, because an empty stomach means that the blood reserves so necessary to vivid thinking are free to go to the brain. Without good blood coursing at a fairly rapid rate through the brain, no man can think keenly or concentratedly. This explains why you think of so many important things when your stomach is empty that never occur to you when your energy is being monopolized by digestion. Heavy dinners and heavy speeches. All public speakers have learned that a heavy dinner means a heavy speech. Elbert Hubbard's rule when on his speaking tours was one every orator should follow. $10 extra if I have to eat, said Fra Elbertus, a far cry from the days when we fed up the preacher at Sunday dinner with the expectation of hearing a better sermon. Uses his head. Just as assimilation is the favorite activity of the alimentive type, head work is the favorite activity of the large-headed cerebral. He is so far removed, evolutionally, from the stomach stage, that his stomach is as much a remnant with him as the brain is a rudiment with the extreme alimentive. The extra blood supply which nature furnishes to any overdeveloped part of the body also tends to encourage him in thinking, just as the same condition encourages the fat man in eating. Forgets to eat. An alimentive never forgets dinner time. But the cerebral is so much more interested in food for his brain than food for his body that he can go without his meals and not mind it. He is likely to have a book and a cracker at his meals, and then forget to eat the cracker. Physical sensitivity. We are mental in proportion to the sensitiveness of our mental organization. The cerebral possesses the most highly developed brain center of any type, and is therefore more sensitive to all those stimuli which act upon the mind. His whole body bespeaks it. The fineness of his features is in direct contrast to some of the other types. The unusual size of his brain denotes a correspondingly intricate organization of nerves, for the nerves are tiny elongations of the brain. The intellectual sensitiveness of any individual can be accurately estimated by noting the comparative size of his brain and body. His triangular head and face. A triangle is a geometrical figure approximated by the cerebral's front face and head. If he is a pure extreme cerebral, a triangle is again what you are reminded of when you look at his head from the side, for his head stands on a small neck, his forehead stands out at the top, while his back head is long. These bring the widest part of his head nearer the top than we find it in other types. Delicate hands. A thin, delicate hand denotes a larger than average cerebral element. See Chart 10. Smooth fingers. What have long been known as smooth fingers are typical of the cerebral. These are not to be confused with the fat, pudgy, babyish fingers of the Alimentive, for though the latter's fingers are smooth around, they do not present straight outlines at the sides, they puff out between the joints. Smooth fingers are characteristic of the extreme cerebral type. They are called this because their outlines run straight up and down. The joints of the Alimentive finger, see Chart 2, mark the narrowest places owing to the fact that the joints are not changeable. In the osseous fingers, see Chart 8, the opposite is true. The joints mark the widest spots and the spaces between are sunken. The fingers of the thoracic are inclined to be pointed like his head, while the muscular's fingers are square at the end and look the power they possess. But the cerebral has fingers unlike any of these. There is no fat to make them pudgy and no muscle to make them firm. Neither are there large joints to make them knotty. Their outlines therefore run in almost straight lines, and the whole hand presents a more frail, aesthetic appearance. Meditation his keynote. Thinking, contemplating, reflecting. All the mental processes coming under the head of meditation constitute the keynote of this type. The Alimentive lives to eat, the thoracic to feel, the muscular to act, the osseous to stabilize, but the cerebral lives to meditate. Air castles. He loves to plan, imagine, dream daydreams, visualize, and go over and over in his mind the manifold possibilities, probabilities, and potentialities of many things. When he tries this to extremes, as a person with a huge head and tiny body is likely to do, he often overlooks the question of the practicability of the thing he is planning. He inclines to go wildcatting, to dream dreams that are impossible of fruition. Thought for thought's sake. He will sit by the hour or by the day thinking out endless ultimates, for the sheer pleasure it gives him. Other men blame him, criticize him, and ridicule him for this, and for the most part he does fail of the practical success by which the efficient American measures everything. But the fact must never be forgotten that the world owes its progress to the men who could see beyond their nose, who could conceive of things no one had ever actually seen. This type, more than any other, has been the inventor in all forms of human progress. The dreamer. Everything accomplished starts with a dream of it, is a saying we all know to be true. Yet we go on forever giving all the big prizes to the doers. But the man who can only dream lives in a very hostile world. His real world is his thoughts, but whenever he steps out of them into human society, he feels a stranger, and he is one. Doesn't fit. The world of today is ruled by people who accomplish. Putting it over, delivering the goods, getting it across, are a part of our language because they represent the standards of the average American today. The cerebral is as much out of place in such an environment as a fish is on dry land. He knows it and he shows it. He doesn't know what the other kind are driving at, and they know so little of what he is driving at that they have invented a special name for him, the nut. Doing isn't his line. He prefers the pleasures of thinking over to all the putting over in the world. This type usually is a failure because he takes it all out in dreaming without ever doing the things necessary to make his dream come true. A visionary. These predilections for overlooking the obvious, the tangible, and the necessary elements in everyday existence tend to make of the cerebral what he is so often called, a visionary. For instance, he will build up in his mind the most imposing superstructure for an invention and confidently tell you it will make millions, but forget to inform himself on such essential questions as will it work, is it transportable, or is there any demand for it? Ahead of his time. He was born ahead of his time applies oftenest to a man of this type. He has brains to see what the world needs, and not infrequently sees how the world could get it. But he is so averse to action himself that unless active people take up his schemes they seldom materialize. What we owe to the dreamers. Men in whom the cerebral type predominated anticipated every step man has made in his political, social, individual, industrial, religious, and economic evolution. They have seen it decades and sometimes centuries in advance, but they were always ridiculed at first. The mutterings of Morse. History is replete with the stories of unappreciated genius. In Washington, D.C., you will have pointed out to you a great elm made historic by Samuel Morse, inventor of the telegraph. He could not make the successful people of his day give him a hearing, but he was so wrapped up in his invention that he used to sit under this tree whenever the weather permitted, and explain all about it to the down and outers, and anyone else who would stop. "Listen to the mutterings of that poor old fool," said the wise ones as they hurried by on the other side of the street. But today people come from everywhere to see the famous Morse elm, and do homage to the great mind that invented the telegraph. Langley's Folly. Today we fly from continent to continent, and air travel is superseding land and water transportation whenever great speed is in demand. A man receives word that his child is dangerously ill. He steps into an airplane, and in less than half the time it would take trains or motors to carry him, alights at his own door. Commerce, industry, war, and the future of whole nations are being revolutionized by this man-made miracle. Yet it is but a few short years since S. P. Langley was sneered at from one end of this country to the other because he stooped to the folly of inventing a flying machine. The trivial telephone. Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone, but it was many years before he could induce anybody to finance it, though some of the wealthiest and therefore supposedly wisest businessmen of the day were asked to do so. None of them would risk $1 on it. Even after it had been tested at the Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia and found to work perfectly, its possibilities were so little realized that for a long while no one could be found to furnish the funds necessary to place it upon the market. The wizardry of wireless. Then, after the world had become accustomed to transacting millions of dollars' worth of business daily over the once despised telegraph and telephone, it took out its doubts on Marconi and his wireless telegraphy. "It's impossible," they said. "Talk without wires? Never!" But now the radio needles pierce the blue from San Diego to Shanghai, and from your steamer in mid-ocean you can say good night to your loved one in Denver. Frank Bacon's play. Ideas always have to go begging at first, and the greater the idea the rougher the sledding. The most successful play ever put on in America was Lightnin', written by Frank Bacon, a typical cerebral osseous. It ran every night for 3 years in New York City. It has made 1,000,000 people happy and $1 million for its sponsors. But when Mr. Bacon, who also plays the title role, took it to the New York producers, they refused it a tryout. But because he had faith in his dream and persisted, his name and his play have become immortal. An ideal combination. The ideal combination is a dreamer who can do, or a doer who knows the power of a dream. Thinking and acting. Almost every individual is doing too much of one and too little of the other. The world's two classes. The world is divided roughly into these two classes: those who act without thinking, and as a result are often in jail, and those who think without acting, and as a result are often in the poorhouse. To be a success. To be a successful individual today, you have to go to dream and then do, plan and then produce, contemplate and then construct, think it out and then work it out. If you do the latter at the expense of the former, you are doomed to work forever for other people, to play some other man's game. If you do the former at the expense of the latter, you are doomed to know only the fringes of life, never to be taken seriously and never to achieve. Pitfalls for dreamers. If you are inclined to take your pleasure out in cerebrating instead of creating, if it suffices you to see a thing in your imagination whether it ever comes to pass or not, you are at a decided disadvantage in this hustling world, and you will never be a success. Pitfalls for the doer. On the other hand, if you are content to do what other men dream about and never have dreams of your own, you will probably always have a berth but will never have 1,000,000. You will exist but you will never know what it is to live. The hungry philosopher. The extreme cerebral can sit on a park bench with an empty purse and an empty stomach, and get as much pleasure out of reflecting on the whichness of the what and the whitherness of the wherefore as an alimentive gets out of a planked steak. Needless to say, each is an enigma to the other, yet most people imagine that because both are human and both walk on their hind legs they are alike. They are no more alike than a cow and a canary. His frail body. The extreme cerebral type finds it difficult to do things because, as we have seen, he is deficient in muscle, one of the vital elements upon which activity and accomplishment are based. This type has little muscle, little bone, and little fat. Deficient in horsepower. He is not inactive for the same reason that the alimentive is. His stomach processes do not slow him down, but his muscles are so undeveloped that he has little inward urge toward activity and little force back of his movements. His heart and lungs are small, so that he also lacks steam and horsepower. He prefers to sit rather than to move, exactly as the muscular prefers to be up and doing rather than to sit still. The man of futile movements. Did you ever look on while a pure cerebral man tried to move a kitchen stove? Ever ask the dreamer in your house to bring down a trunk from the attic? Will you ever forget the almost human perversity with which that stove and that trunk resisted him, or how amusing it looked to see a grown man outwitted at every turn by an inert mass? "I have carried on a lifelong feud with inanimate things," a pure cerebral friend remarked to us recently. "I have a fight on my hands every time I attempt to use a pair of scissors, a knife, and a fork, a hammer or a collar button." His jerky walk. Because he is short, the cerebral takes short steps. Because he lacks muscle, he lacks a powerful stride. As a result, he has a walk that is irregular and sometimes jerky. When he walks slowly, this jerk is not apparent, but when hurried it is quite noticeable. End of Part 1 of Chapter 5.
Part 2 of Chapter 5 of How to Analyze People on Sight. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Paul C. Newman. Storyfolksinger.co.uk. How to Analyze People on Sight Through the Science of Human Analysis. The 5 Human Types by Elsie Lincoln Benedict and Ralph Payne Benedict. Section 2 of Chapter 5. Section 12. Part 2 of Chapter 5. Is lost in chairs. The cerebral gets lost in the same chair that is itself lost under the large, spreading osseous, and for the same reason. Built for the average, chairs are much too large for the cerebral, as they are too small for the big bony man. So the cerebral's legs dangle and his arms don't reach. Dislikes social life. Though a most sympathetic friend, the cerebral does not make many friends and does not care for many. He is too abstract to add to the gaiety of social gatherings, for these are based on the enjoyment of the concrete. Enjoys the intellectuals. Readers, thinkers, writers, intellectuals like himself are the kinds of people the cerebral enjoys most. Another reason why he has few friends is because these people, being in the great minority, are not easy to find. Ignores the ignorant. People who let others do their thinking for them, and those who are not aware of the great things going on in world movements, are not popular with this type. He sometimes has a secret contempt for them, and ignores them as completely as they ignore him. Avoids the limelight. Modesty and reserve, almost as marked in the men as in the women, characterize this extreme type. They do things of great moment sometimes, invent something or write something extraordinary, but even then they try to avoid being lionized. They prefer the shadows rather than the spotlight. Thus they miss many of the good things less brainy and more aggressive people gain. But it does no good to explain this to a cerebral. He enjoys retirement and is constantly missing opportunities because he refuses to mix. Cares little for money. Friends mean something to the cerebral. Fame sometimes means much, but money means little. In this he is the exact opposite of the osseous, to whom the pecuniary advantages or disadvantages of a thing are always significant. The pure cerebral finds it difficult to interest himself in his finances. He seldom counts his change. He will go away from his room, leaving every cent he owns lying on the dresser, and then forget to lock the door. This type of person almost never asks for a raise. He is too busy dreaming dreams to plan what he will do in his old age. He prefers staying at the same job with congenial associates to finding another, even if it paid more. Very often poor. Since we get only what we go after in this world, it follows that the cerebral is often poor. To make money, one must want money. Competition for it is so keen that only those who want it badly and work with efficiency ever get very much of it. The cerebral takes so little interest in money that he gets lost in the shuffle. Not until he wakes up some morning with the poorhouse staring him in the face does he give it serious consideration, and then he does not do much about it. Almost never rich. History shows that few people of the pure cerebral type ever became rich. Even the most brilliant gave so much more thought to their mission than the practical ways and means that they were usually seriously handicapped for the funds necessary to its materialization. Madame Curie, co-discoverer of radium, said to be the greatest living woman of this type, is world famous and has done humanity a noble service, but her experiments were always carried on against great disadvantages because she had not the financial means to purchase more than the most limited quantities of the precious substance. About clothes. Clothes are almost the last thing the cerebral thinks about. As we have seen, all the other types have decided preferences as to their clothes. The alimentive demands comfort, the thoracic, style, the muscular, durability, and the osseous, sameness. But the extreme cerebral type says anything will do, so we often see him with a coat of one colour, trousers of another, and a hat of another, with no gloves at all, and his tie missing. Often absent-minded. We have always said people were absent-minded when their minds were absent from what they were doing. This often applies to the cerebral, for he is capable of greater concentration than other types. Also, he is so frequently compelled to do things in which he has no interest that his mind naturally wanders to the things he cares about. A cerebral professor, whom we know, sometimes appeared before his Harvard classes in bedroom slippers. A thoracic would not be likely to let his own brother catch him in his. Writes better than he talks. The poor talker sometimes surprises us by being a good writer. Such a one is usually of the cerebral type. He likes to think out every phrase of a thing and put it into just the right words before giving it to the world. So many a cerebral who does little talking outside his intimate circle does a good deal of surreptitious writing. It may be only the keeping of a diary, jotting down memoranda, or writing long letters to his friends, but he will write something. Some of the world's greatest ideas have come to light first in the forgotten manuscripts of people of this type who died without showing their writings to anyone. Evidently they did not consider them of sufficient importance, or did not care as much about publishing them as putting them down. An inveterate reader. Step into the reference rooms of your city library on a summer's day, and you will stand more chance of finding examples of this extreme type there than in any other spot. You may have thought these extreme types are difficult to locate, since the average American is a combination, but it is easy to find any of them if you look in the right places. In every case you will find them in the very places where a study of human analysis would tell you to look for them. Where to look for pure types? When you wish to find some pure alimentives, go to a restaurant that is famous for its rich foods. When you want to see several extreme thoracics, drop into any vaudeville show and take your choice from the actors or from the audience. When you are looking for pure musculars, go to a boxing match or a prize fight and you'll be surrounded by them. When looking for the osseous, attend a convention of expert accountants, bankers, lumbermen, hardware merchants, or pioneers. All these types appear in other places and in other vocations, but they are certain to be present in large numbers any day in any of the above-named places. But when you are looking for this interesting little extreme thinker type, you must go to a library. We specify the reference room of the library because those who search for fiction, newspapers, and magazines are not necessarily of the pure type, and we specify a day in summer rather than in winter, so that you will be able to select your subjects from amongst people who are there in spite of the weather rather than because of it. Interested in everything. I never saw a book without wanting to read it, said a cerebral friend to us the other day. This expresses the interest every person of this type has in the printed page. I never see a library without wishing I had time to go there and stay until I had read everything in it. The bookworm. So it is small wonder that such a one becomes known early in life as a bookworm. As a little child, He takes readily to reading and won't take to much else. Because we all learn quickly what we like, he is soon devouring books for older heads. Why won't he run and play like other children, wails mother. And that boy ought to be made to join the ball team, scolds father. But that boy continues to keep his nose in a book. He can talk on almost any subject when he will, and knows pretty well what is going on in the world at an age when other boys and girls are oblivious to everything but gymnasiums and girls. Old for his years. The little old man or little old woman of 10 is always a cerebral child. The alimentives are the babies of the race and never entirely grow up, no matter how many years they live. But the cerebral is born old. From infancy he shows more maturity than other children. The teacher's pet. His studiousness and tractableness lead to one reward in childhood, though it often costs him dear as a man. He usually becomes the teacher's favourite, and no wonder. He always has his lessons, he gives her little trouble, and is about all that keeps many a teacher at her poorly paid post. Little sense of time. The extreme cerebral often has a deficient sense of time. He is less conscious of the passage of the hours than any other type. The muscular and the osseous often have an almost uncanny time sense, but the extreme cerebral man often lacks it. Forgetting to wind his watch, or to consult it for hours when he does, is a familiar habit of this type. We know a bride in Detroit whose flat looked out on a bakery and a bookstore. She told us that she used to send her cerebral hubby across the street for the loaf of bread that was found lacking just as they were ready to sit down to dinner, only to wait hours and then have him come back with a book under his arm, no bread, and no realization of how long he had been gone. Inclined to the unorthodox. Other types tend to follow various religions according to the individual's upbringing, but the cerebral composes a large percentage of the unorthodox. The political reformer. Because all forms of personal combat are distasteful to him, the pure cerebral does not go out and fight for reform as often as the muscular, nor die for causes as often as the osseous types. But almost every cerebral believes in extreme reforms of one kind or another. He is comparatively silent, but faithful member of clubs, leagues, and other kinds of reform organization. He may never star in them, he seldom cares to, but his mite is always ready when subscriptions are taken, even if he has to go without breakfast for a week to make up for it. This type is usually sufficiently intelligent to know the world needs reforming, and sufficiently conscientious to want to help to do it. He is not bound by traditions or customs as much as other types, but does more of his own thinking. Without the foresight and faithfulness of the cerebrals, very few reforms could have started or have lived to finish. The social nonconformist. Ask any small-bodied, large-headed man if he believes in the double standard of morals, anti-suffrage, eternal punishment, saloons, or the 400. This little man with the big head may not openly challenge you or argue with you when you stand up for things as they are, for he is a peaceable chap, but he inwardly smiles or sneers at what he considers your troglodyte ideas. He sees a day coming when babies will be named for their fathers, whether the minister officiated or not, when the man who talks about the good old days of a wide-open saloon on every corner will himself be a hazy myth, and when society idlers will not be considered better than people who earn their livings. The world's pathfinder. The cerebral, therefore, leads the world in ideas. The world is managed by fat men, entertained by florid men, built by muscular men, opposed by bony men. But it is improved in the final analysis by its thinking men. These thinkers have a difficult time of it. They preach to deaf ears, and often they die in poverty. But at last posterity comes around to their way of thinking, abandons the old ruts, and follows the trails they have blazed. Therefore, many great thinkers who were unknown while alive became famous after death. More often than not, fame is the food of the tomb. Indifference to surroundings. A wise man it was who said, "Let me see a man's surroundings and I will tell you what he is." The cerebral does not really live in his house, but in his head, and for that reason does not feel as great an urge to decorate, amplify, or even furnish the place in which he dwells. Step into the room of any little-bodied, large-headed man, and you'll be struck by two facts: that he has fewer gimcracks and more journals lying around than the rest of your friends. In the room of the alimentive you'll find cushions, sofas, and eats. In that of the thoracic you'll find colourful, unusual things. The muscular will have durable, solid, plain things. The osseous will have fewer of everything, but what he does have will be in order. But the pure cerebral's furnishings, if he is responsible for them, will be an indifferent array, with no two pieces matching. Furthermore, everything will be piled with newspapers, magazines, books, and clippings. Often die young. The good die young is an old saying which may or may not be true, but there is no doubt that the extreme cerebral type of individual often dies at an early age. The reason is clear. An efficient but controlled assimilative system is the first requisite for long life, and the pure cerebral does not have an efficient one. Moreover, he is prone to neglect what nutritive mechanism he does have by irregular eating, by being too poor to afford wholesome foods, and by forgetting to eat at all. Physical assets. By reason of his deficient physicality, the cerebral cannot be said to possess any decided physical assets. But two tendencies which help decidedly to prolong life are undereating and his refusal to dissipate. It's been said many times by the best-known experts that more deaths are caused annually in America by overeating than by any other two causes. Undereating is a very necessary precaution, but the cerebral carries it too far. The cerebral, lacking a large alimentary system, is not tempted to overload his stomach or overtax his vital organs, and because he is a highly evolved type, possessing little of the instincts which are at the bottom of most dissipation, he is not addicted to late hours, wine, women, or excitement. Diseases he is most susceptible to. Nervous diseases of all kind most frequently afflict this type. His nervous system is supersensitive. It breaks down more easily and more completely than that of more elemental types, just as a high-powered car is more easily wrecked than a truck. Music he likes. Highbrow music is kept alive mostly by highbrows. While the other types cultivate a taste for the grand opera or simulate it because it is supposedly proper, the cerebral really enjoys it. In the top gallery at any good concert you will find many cerebrals. Entertainment he prefers. The serious drama and education lectures are other favourite entertainments of the cerebral. He cares little for vaudeville, girl shows, or claptrap farces. The kind of programme that keeps the fat man's smile spread from ear to ear takes the cerebral to the box office for his money. A steady patron at the movies. The cerebral goes to the movies more than any other type save the fat man, but not for the same reasons. The large-brained, small-bodied man cares nothing for most of the recreations with which the other types amuse themselves, so the theatre is almost his only diversion. It is oftentimes the only kind of entertainment within the reach of his purse, and it deals with many different subjects, in almost all of which the pure cerebral has some interest. Don't laugh at same things. But if you'll notice next time you go to a movie, it will be clear to you that the fat people and the large-headed people do not laugh at the same things. The pie-throwing and cutie coquette that convulse the 200-pounder fail to so much as turn up the corners of the other man's mouth. And the subtle things that amuse the cerebral go over the heads of the pure alimentives. Cares for no sports. But the fat man and the large-brained man have one trait in common. Neither of them cares for strenuous sports. The fat man dislikes them because he is too heavy on his feet. The cerebral dislikes them because he is too heavy at the opposite extremity. He expends what little energy he has in mental activities, so has none left for violent physical exertion. Likes mental games. This type enjoys quiet games requiring thought. Chess and checkers are favourites with them. The impersonal. The cerebral is the most impersonal of all types. While the alimentive tends to measure everything from the standpoint of what it can do for him personally, the cerebral tends to think more impersonally and to be interested in many things outside of his own affairs. Lacks pugnacity. Primitive things of every kind are distasteful to the cerebral. The instincts of digestion, sex, hunting, and pugnacity are but little developed in him. He is therefore a man who likes harmony, avoids coming to blows, and goes out of his way to keep the peace. Such a man does not go hunting, and seldom owns a gun. He dislikes to kill or harm any creature. The cleverest crook. The cerebral is usually a naturally moral person, but when lacking in conscience, either through bad training or other causes, he occasionally turns to crime for his income. This is because his physical frailty makes it difficult for him to do heavy work, while his mentality enables him to think out ways and means of getting a living without it. Though the clumsy criminal may belong to any type, the cleverest crooks, those who defy detection for years, always have a large element of the cerebral in their makeup. Big brains in little jobs. There are two kinds of work in the world: head work and hand work. Mental and manual. If you can star in either, life guarantees you a good living, but if you are good at neither, you are doomed to dependence. The cerebral's physical frailty unfits him for the manual, and unless he is school or self-educated, he becomes the sorriest of all human misfits. He fails between the two and leads a precarious existence, working in the lighter indoor positions requiring the least mentality. If you will keep your eyes open, you will many times note that the little waiter in the high-class restaurant or hotel has a head very large for his body. Such men are much better read, have a far greater appreciation of art and literature, and more natural refinement than the porky patrons they serve. Social assets. A fine sense of the rights of others and natural modesty and refinement are the chief social assets of this type. Social liabilities. Lack of self-expression, too great reserve, and too much abstractness in conversation are the things that handicap the cerebral. His small stature and timid air also add to his appearance of insignificance and cause him to be overlooked at social affairs. Emotional assets. Sympathy, gentleness, and self-sacrifice are other assets of this type. Emotional liabilities. A tendency to nervous excitement and to a lack of balance are the chief emotional handicaps of this type. Business assets. This type has no traits which can properly be called business assets. He dislikes business, is repelled by its standards, and has no place in any of its purely commercial branches. Business liabilities. His inability to keep his feet on the ground and his tendency to live in the clouds and to be generally impractical unfit this type for business life. Domestic strength. Tenderness, consideration, and idealism are the chief domestic assets of the cerebral type. Domestic weakness. Inability to provide for his family, incapacity for making money necessary to meet their needs, and his tendency to spend the little he does have on impossible schemes are what wreck the domestic life of many splendid cerebral men. Her inability to make $1 to do the work of two is a serious handicap to the cerebral wife or mother. Should aim at. This man should aim at building up his body and practicalizing his mental processes. Should avoid. The cerebral should avoid shallow, ignorant people, speculation, and those situations that carry him farther away from the real world. His strong points. His thinking, capacity, progressiveness, unselfishness, and highly civilized instincts are the strongest points of this type. His weakest points, impracticality, dreaminess, physical frailty, and his tendency to plan without doing are the traits which stand in the way of his success. How to deal with this type socially. Don't expect him to be a social lion. Don't expect him to mingle with many. Invite him when there are to be few congenial souls, and if he wanders into the library, leave him alone. How to deal with this type in business. Don't employ this man for heavy manual labor or where there is more arm work than head work. Give him mental positions or none. If you are dealing with him as a tradesman, resist the temptation to take advantage of his impracticality, and don't treat him as if you thought money was everything. Remember, the chief distinguishing marks of the Cerebral in the order of their importance are the high forehead and a proportionately large head for the body. Any person who has these is largely of the Cerebral type, no matter what other types may be included in his makeup. To understand combinations, determine which type predominates in a subject. If there is any doubt in your mind about this, do these 4 things. First, note the body build which one of the 5 body types, as shown in charts 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9, does he most resemble. In doing this, it will aid you if you will note whether fat, bone, or muscle predominates in his bodily structure. Second, decide which of the 5 typical faces his face most resembles. Third, decide which of the 5 typical hands his hands most resemble. Fourth, if still undecided, note his voice, gestures, and movements, and they will leave no doubt in your mind as to which of these types comes first and which second. Having decided which type predominates and which is second to him, the significance of this combination is made clear to you by the following law. Law of combination. The type predominating in a person determines what he does throughout his life, the nature of his main activities. The type which comes second in development will determine the way he does things, the methods he will follow in doing what his predominant type signifies. The third element, if noticeable, merely flavors his personality. Thus, a cerebral muscular alimentive does mental things predominantly throughout his life, but in a more muscular way than if he were an extreme cerebral. The alimentive element, being third down the list, will tend to make him eat and assimilate more food than he otherwise would. End of section 2 of chapter 5.
Part 1 of Chapter 6 of How to Analyze People on Sight. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. How to Analyze People on Sight Through the Science of Human Analysis, The 5 Human Types, by Elsie Lincoln Benedict and Ralph Payne Benedict. Part 1 of Chapter 6. Types that should marry and should not marry each other. I am so sorry to hear the Browns are getting divorced. I have known George and Mary for years, and they are as fine a man and woman as I ever saw, but they just don't seem to be able to get along together. How many times you have heard something like this. And the speaker got nearer the truth than he knew. For the Georges and Marys everywhere are, on the whole, fine men and women. Married to the wrong one. Each one is all right in himself, but merely married to the wrong person, a fact we have recognized when both George and Mary made successes of their second ventures and lived happily ever after. Human happiness, as we have noted in the introduction to this volume, is attained only through doing what the organism was built to do in an environment that is favorable. Marriage is only the attempt of 2 people to attain these 2 ends individually, mutually, and simultaneously. Difficulties of double harness. Now, since it is almost impossible for one to achieve happiness when untrammeled and free, is it to be wondered at that so few achieve it in double harness? For the difficulties to be surmounted are doubled, and the helps are halved by the presence of a running mate. Mere marriedness is not mating. That 2 can live on less than 1 is not true, but it is nearer the truth than that 2 can find ultimate happiness together easier than either can find an approximation of happiness alone. This is not saying that anyone who is unmated can have happiness as complete as that which comes to the rightly mated, for nothing else in life can compare with that, but they must be rightly mated, not merely married. No one who has observed or thought on this subject will deny that it is 1,000 times better not to be married at all than to be married to the wrong person. Secrets Told by Statistics. Surveys of the causes for divorce during the past 10 years in the United States have revealed some startling facts, facts which only prove again that human analysis shows us the truth about ourselves as no science has ever shown it to us before. One of the most illuminating facts these surveys have revealed is that only those men and women can be happy together whose natures automatically encourage each other in the doing of the things each likes to do in the way each likes to do them. Inborn inclination determines the things every human being prefers to do concerning all the fundamental activities of his life, and also the manner in which he prefers to do them. These inborn inclinations, as we have previously pointed out, are written all over us in the unmistakable language of type. When we know a man's type, we know what things he prefers to do in life's main experiences and how he prefers to do them. And we know that unless he is permitted to do approximately what he wants to do in approximately the way he prefers, he becomes unhappy and unsuccessful. Infatuation no guide. These biological bents are so deeply embedded in every individual that no amount of affection, admiration, or respect, or passion for any other individual suffices to enable anyone to go through long years doing what he dislikes and still be happy. Only in the first flush of infatuation can he sacrifice his own preferences for those of another. After a while passion and infatuation ooze away. Nature sees to that, just as she sees to their coming in the first place. Then there return the old leanings, preferences, tendencies, and cravings inherent in the type of each. The real reversion to type. Under this urge of his type, each reverts gradually but irresistibly to his old habits, doing largely what he prefers to do in the ways that are to his liking. When that day comes, the real test of their marriage begins. If the distance between them is too great, they cannot cross that chasm, and therefore each lives a life inwardly removed from the other. They make attempts to cross the barrier, and some of these are successful for a short while. They talk to and fro across the void sometimes, but their communings become less frequent, their voices less distinct, until at last each withdraws into himself. There he lives, in the world of his own nature, as completely separated from his mate as though they dwelt on different planets. We can know. But how is one to know the right person, you ask? By recognizing science's recent discovery to the effect that certain types can travel helpfully, happily, and harmoniously together, and that certain others never can. What every individual owes to himself. Every individual owes it to himself to find the right work and the right mate, because these are fundamental needs of every human being. Lacking them, life is a failure. Possessing but one of them, life is half a failure. To obtain and apply the very fullest knowledge toward the attainment of these two great requisites should be the aim of every person. Neglected subjects. Despite the fact that these are the most vital problems pertaining to human happiness, and that every individual's life depends for its glory or defeat, joy or sorrow, upon the right settlement of them, they are two of the most neglected. Divorce courts. Our divorce courts are full of splendid men and women who are there not because they are weak or wrong, but because they stepped into nature's age-old instinct trap without realizing where it would lead them. These men and women who pay so heavy a price for their ignorance and blindness are not to blame. Most of them have been taught that to be legally bound together was sufficient guarantee of marital bliss. But experience has shown us that there are certain kinds of people each individual can associate with in harmony, and that there are those with whom he could never be happy, though 100 ministers pronounced them mated for life. Times will change. But the time is coming when we will select our mates scientifically, not merely sentimentally. It is also coming when we will know what every child is fitted to do by looking at him, just as we know better today than to set a shepherd dog on the trail of criminals or a bloodhound to herd sheep. The Great Quest. Instead of beclouding the significance and the sanity of life's great quest, instead of encouraging every manner of mismating, as we do today, we will some day arm our children with knowledge enabling them to wisely choose their life work and their life mate. Dolly's Dimple. The fact that Dolly has a dimple may make your senses whirl, but it is not sufficient basis for marriage. There are things of vastly greater importance, though of course this does not seem possible to you at the time. Sammy's Smile. And though Sammy sports a smile the gods might envy, he may not be the right man for Dolly. Even a smile that never comes off, great lubricator that it undeniably is not sufficient foundation for a "till death do us part" contract. Little Things versus Big Things. When we hear of a divorce, we assume that it was caused by the inability of those two people to agree upon fundamentals. We suppose that they found within themselves wide divergences of opinion, feeling, or attitude regarding really worthwhile questions, social, religious, political, or economic. We are inclined to imagine that the little things should take care of themselves, and that only the big things, such as these, should be allowed to separate two lives, once they have been joined together. What the Records Show. Yet the exact opposite is what happens, according to the divorce records of the United States. These records show that divorces do not arise out of differences in what we have always called the big things of life, but out of those things which we have always called the little ones. Why he can't change. We do not expect a husband or wife to change his religion and take on his partner's faith. We imagine this is an inherent thing more or less deeply embedded in him and not to be altered, while we consider it only fair and right for John to give up his favorite sport, his hobby, and some of his habits for Mary's sake. At the risk of shocking the supersensitive, it must be admitted that most individuals get their religious leanings from external sources, parents, teachers, ministers, friends, and especially by the accident of being born in a certain country, among a certain sect, or within a certain community. On the other hand, one's preferences in the matter of diversions are born in him, part and parcel of his very being, and remain so to the end of his life. Accordingly, just as it is easier to change the frosting on a cake than to change the inside, it is easier to change a man's religion than to change his activities. Diversion and Divorce. Most of the divorces granted in America during the past 10 years have been demanded, not on grounds dealing with the so-called fundamentals, but for differences regarding so-called unimportant things. And more than 70 out of every 100 divorces every year in this country are asked for on grounds pertaining to diversion. In other words, more than 70% of American divorces are granted because husbands and wives cannot adapt themselves to each other in the matter of how they shall spend their leisure hours. People who cannot play together will not work together long, said Elbert Hubbard. Human analysis, which shows that each type tends automatically to the doing of certain things in certain ways whenever free to act, proves that this is just as literal as it sounds. The only time we are free to act is during our leisure hours. All other hours are mortgaged to earn a living, in the accomplishment of which we often have very little outlet for natural trends. So it is only after hours and over Sundays that the masses of mankind have an opportunity to express their real natures. Uncongenial work affects marriage. The less one's work permits him to do the things he enjoys, the more surely will he turn to them in the hours when this restraint is removed. If such a one has a husband or wife who encourages him in the following of his natural bents during leisure hours, that marriage stands a big chance of being happy. These two people may differ widely in their respective religious ideas. One may be a Catholic, the other a Protestant, or one a Shaker and the other a Christian Scientist, but they can build lasting happiness together. On the other hand, two people who agree perfectly as to religious, social, and political views, but who cannot agree as to the disposition of their leisure hours, are bound for the rocks. As the honeymoon fades, each reverts to the kind of recreation congenial to his type. If his mate is averse to his diversions, each goes his own way. The Eternal Triangle. The tragedy of "the other man" and "the other woman" is not a mystery to him who understands human analysis. It is always the result of finding someone of kindred standards and tastes, that is, someone whose type is congenial. The eternal triangle arises again and again in human lives, not accidentally, but as the inevitable result of violating inexorable laws. Law of Marital Happiness. Marriage should take place only between those whose first type elements are sufficiently similar for them to enjoy the same general diversions, yet whose second type elements are sufficiently dissimilar to make each strong where the other is weak. The application of the law to each of the 5 types will be explained in the following sections of this chapter. Part 1. The Alimentive in Love. Just as each type reacts differently to all the other situations in life, each reacts differently to love. The Alimentive, as we have pointed out, is less mature than the other types, with the Thoracic next, and so on down to the Cerebral, which is the most mature of all. Because the Alimentive has rightly been called the baby of the race, because no extremely fat person ever really grows up, this type prefers those love expressions natural to the immature. The most affectionate type. Caressing, petting, fondling, and cuddling, those demonstrations not of wild passion but of affection such as children enjoy, are most often used by alimentive men and women when in love. Because they are inclined to bestow little attentions more or less promiscuously, they often get the reputation of being flirtatious when they are not. Such actions are often taken by the one to whom they are directed as indicating more than the giver means. So beware of taking the little pats of fat people too seriously. They mean well, but have the baby's habit of bestowing innocent smiles and caresses everywhere. Why they are loved. Each type has traits peculiar to itself which tend to make others fall in love with it. In the Alimentive, the outstanding trait which wins love is his sweet disposition. The human ego is so constituted that we tend to like all interesting people who do not offer us opposition. The Alimentive is amenable, affable, agreeable. His ready smile, his tendency to promote harmony, and his general geniality bring him love and keep it for him, while more clever types lose it. Millionaires marry them. Why does a brilliant business man marry that fat little woman who is not his equal mentally? The world has asked many a time. Human analysis answers it, as it answers so many of the other age-long queries about human eccentricities. The little fat woman has a sweet disposition, one of the most soothing of human attributes. The business man has enough of brilliant people all day. When he gets home he is rather inclined to be merely the tired business man, and in that state nothing is more agreeable than a wife with a smile. As for fat husbands, many a wife supports them in preference to being supported by another and less agreeable man. The prettiest type. When a woman becomes engaged her friends all inquire, "What does he do?" But when a man's engagement is announced everyone asks, "What does she look like?" So it is small wonder that men have placed prettiness near the top of the list, and the Alimentive woman is the prettiest of all types. This little fact must not be overlooked when searching for the causes which have prompted so many of the world's wealthiest men to marry them. Other men may have to content themselves with plain wives, but the man of means can pick and choose, and every man prefers a pretty wife to a plain one. Feminine prettiness, not beauty, consists of the rosebud mouth, the baby eyes, the cute little nose, the round cheeks, the dimpled chin, etc., all more or less monopolized by the Alimentive type. The womanly type. The fat woman's refusal to worry keeps the wrinkles away, and as long as she does not become obese she remains attractive. Her clinging vine ways make men call her the most womanly type, and even when she tips the scales at 250, they are still for her. Then they say, "She looks so motherly." So the fat woman goes through life more loved by men than any other type, and in old age she presents a picture of calmness and domestic serenity that is appealing to everybody. Marry earliest and oftenest. Being in demand, the Alimentive woman marries earlier than any other type. As a widow, the same demand takes her off the marriage market while younger and brainier women pine their lives away in spinsterhood. Look back and you will recall that it was the pretty, plump girls who had beaux earliest, married earliest, and who, even when left with several children, did not remain widows long. Desirable traits of Alimentive wives. Next to her sweet disposition, the traits which make the Alimentive wife most pleasant to get along with are serenity, optimism, and good cooking. Her weaknesses. Many an Alimentive wife loses her husband's love because of her too easygoing habits. Unless controlled, these lead to slovenliness in personal appearance and housekeeping. The Alimentive wife and money. The Alimentive wife usually has her share of the family income because she has the endearing ways that wring it out of hubby. Salespeople everywhere say, "We like to see a fat woman coming, for she usually has money, spends it freely, and is easy to please." In disagreements. What they do with their quarrels after they are through with them determines to a great extent the ultimate success of any pair's marriage. Alimentive husbands and wives bury the hatchet sooner than other types, and they avoid altercations. Lives anywhere. The Alimentive wife offers less resistance to her husband's plans than any other. So when he announces they are moving to some other neighborhood, city or state, she acquiesces with better grace than other types. Family friends. The responsibility of adding new friends to the family rests equally upon each partner in marriage. The average husband, by reason of mingling more with the world, has the greater opportunity, but every wife can and should consider that she owes it to herself, her husband, and her children to contribute her quota. Alimentive husbands and wives add their share of new acquaintances to any marriage in which they are partners. The Alimentive wife always enjoys having people in to dinner, and the Alimentive husband enjoys bringing them. The warmth of hospitality in Alimentive homes brings them more friendships than come to other types. Fat man also marries young. The fat man marries young, but for a different reason than the fat woman. The fat man, as you will note, gets a job early in life. From that time on, his services seldom go begging. He makes a good salary earlier than the other types, and is therefore sooner in a position to marry. The ladies' man. Just as the fat woman is a man's woman, so the fat man is almost invariably a ladies' man. The fat man usually "knows women" better than any other type, and it is certain that the fat woman knows men. Her record proves it. No fat bachelors. Just as there are few fat old maids, there are few fat bachelors. You can count on the fingers of one hand all the really overweight ones you ever knew. The best provider. Because he makes money easily through the various forms of his superior business qualifications, the average fat man has plenty of money for his family and likes to spend it upon them. He is the best provider of all the types. Fat people are the most lenient parents and usually overindulge their children. The husband who makes a habit for years of sending home crates of the first strawberries, melons, and oranges of the season is a fat one every time. Desirable traits of fat husbands. His generous provision for his family and the fact that he is essentially a family man are two desirable traits of the Alimentive husband. He depends more on his home than other types, he marries young to have a home, and he is seldom farther away from it than he has to be. It is unfortunate that the one type which makes the best traveling man is more inconvenienced by the absence from home than any other type would be. But he has not submitted silently. All the world knows what a hard life the traveling salesman leads, and how he misses the wife, the kids, and the good home cooking. Weaknesses of Alimentive Husbands. The Alimentive husband has but one weakness that materially endangers his marital happiness. He is inclined to be too easy and extravagant, and not to save money. Mates for Alimentives. Because of his amenability, the Alimentive can marry almost any type and be happy. But for fullest happiness, those who are predominantly Alimentive, that is, those in whom the Alimentive type comes first, should marry, as their first choice, those who are predominantly Muscular. The Muscular shares the Alimentive's ambition to "get on in the world," and at the same time adds to the union the practicality which offsets the too easy-going, lackadaisical tendencies of the Alimentive. The second choice for the predominantly Alimentive should be the one who is predominantly Thoracic. These two types have much in common. The brilliance and speed of the Thoracic keeps the Alimentive looking to his laurels, and thus tends to prevent the carelessness which is so great a handicap to the predominantly Alimentive. The third choice of the predominantly Alimentive may be one who is also predominantly Alimentive, but in that case it should be an Alimentive Muscular or an Alimentive Cerebral. The last type the pure Alimentive should ever marry is the pure Cerebral. End of Part 1 of Chapter 6.